By the time y'all are seeing this, the jury is probably out for deliberations and this ongoing mushroom massacre saga. So let's talk about some of those jury instructions in today's video.
Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad, sipping from the cup at hey.
Now hold on everybody, let's do a quick sofa sidebar now. Keep in mind, ain't no cop, ain't no doctor, ain't no lawyer, ain't no therapist, ain't none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? Only credentials we got up in here is my sass, and this sofa. Now keep in mind also, I'm just giving my opinions on very public information, so do your own research, come to your own opinions, and drop them off in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you do like what you see here at the Sofa Squad, drop a little like, drop a little comment, drop a little share. It helps the channel out immensely. Now let's get edition. Hello Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. This is still a sofa. This is still a pillow. And this is still a Paul. Yes, that's right. My name is Paul if you're new to the channel. If you're not new to the channel, my name's still Paul. Okay. Now, we are wrapping this up. Y'all, this trial, 11 weeks or so now. I mean, this is crazy, right? So we're going to be going over a lot of the jury instructions. We read through some of these on the podcast channel where we go live. We talk about stuff like in the moment, obviously. And it's a lot, okay? So that being said, this isn't even all the stuff they went over, right? Now, don't forget to follow some of those major news media publications that I've referenced here, ABC, Mushroom Daily. I'll put them all up on the screen here. They've been in the courtroom. They have nuances that obviously I wouldn't for this because, well, I wasn't there, okay? So that being said, let's just go ahead and jump in and see what the judge was saying and what he wasn't saying. So like I said, both sides rested last week or whatever it was at this point when you're seeing this. Now, Justice Bill said it was going to take him like 2 days to charge the jury, but literally it kept going and kept going. So once he's finished doing that, the jury is going to be pared down from 14 to 12 to determine like who's going to deliberate. Now the alternate jurors are going to be chosen using a balloting off process, which basically means that they're going to be chosen at random, right? Now here's what we're going to do, and you're going to need to buckle up for it, okay? Because we're going to go ahead and head down under to see what's been going on in courtroom 4. Now, like I said, again, quick disclaimer, this was not everything that was included in the instructions per the blogs from ABC and The Guardian. I basically just went through, picked out the points that I felt were most significant that I wanted to talk about here. Again, it was very in-depth, and essentially they went over the whole trial again, right? I think it was like 365 pages. I mean, it was intense, okay? So Justice Beal says that his charge is going to include 3 different sections: the principles of law, issues to consider, and the procedure that they have to follow. Now, Justice Beal told the jurors that they are the judges of facts, and they have to apply the law to facts to determine if Patterson is guilty or not guilty of the charges, obviously. Now, he also reminded them that they don't have to accept the arguments of the prosecution or the defense. And he cautioned them, and I'll quote him, he says, if you do not agree with their view, just put it aside. He even stressed the importance of evidence and reminded them if he omitted some of it from his summary, that doesn't mean it's insignificant. And he also said the same thing about stuff that was mentioned. He's like, look, just because I'm saying it here doesn't mean that it means more than something or else or whatever. You know, just take it for what it is. Now, the jury was provided 86-page directory of exhibits and evidence. Now, the first portion, which was basically covering like the chronology, it went over 15 years, okay? So 2007 to 2022. Now, Justice Bill told the jurors that the document was a tool to dip into. It wasn't homework or anything like that. Now, Justice Bill also explained how this chronology is laid out, and he made it very clear that he endeavored to steer clear of controversy. Now, he also said that if there's something that they think isn't correct, that their opinion is ultimately what matters, not his. Now, he'll cite this example for context. I'm going to put it on the screen and I'm going to read it to you. So you'll see this is Melissa Brown. She was, doing what I call like live updates from the courtroom, whatever. So it says, Justice Beal says during that August 1st conversation, at one point, Erin said the children left the room momentarily, and she alleges Simon said, is that how you poison my parents? Using the dehydrator? And she answered, of course not. He says the evidence is not mentioned in that entry of the chronology because it's a point of controversy. Now, he also reminded the jurors that the answers the witnesses gave in court are the evidence, not the questions that they were asked. Justice Beal also cautioned them to be wary of transcripts in case of errors, and he asserted that they must ignore all other considerations, including any prejudice or sympathy for anyone in the case. Now, he also echoed some sentiments that we heard last week in Annette Rogers' closing, and he stated to the jury, and again, I'm going to put this screenshot up here and we'll read through it together. Again, by Melissa Brown, and it says, jury warned warned not to allow sympathy to affect its verdict. Justice Beale says the prosecution must have proven that Erin Patterson was criminally responsible for the deaths of her in-laws and Ian Wilkinson's illness. He says the jury cannot allow sympathy for the Patterson or Wilkinson families to affect their judgment. I'm not asking you to be inhumane. None of us are robots, he says. He tells the jury it must scrupulously guard against any sympathy interfering with their duty to decide the verdict. Now, Justice Beale would also tell the jury that they must assess the credibility of the evidence given by each witness. Now, he says that using what they believe is true and disregarding what they don't believe is true, okay? He also had this to say about the kids' testimony, and I'm going to quote him. He said, while they can accurately remember and report past events, but their language and development affects how they understand words and phrases, a child's level of development also affects whether they understand certain concepts. Now, as far as Erin Patterson's evidence, he told the jurors that the defendant did not have to take the stand, right? That she chose to, okay? And he said, in choosing to give evidence, she undertook to tell the truth, but it's your job to assess her evidence in the same way as all other witnesses. Then the jurors directed the jury and said, I'll quote them, if you find her evidence to be true, you must find her not guilty. If you are not sure about Patterson's evidence, that is reasonable doubt and must find her not guilty of the 4 charges. However, if you don't believe her, you have to put her testimony aside and examine if the prosecution has proven the rest of the case beyond reasonable doubt. Then they talk about those good character references by the Pattersons. Now, Justice Beale mentioned that the various witnesses who had like nice things to say about Erin's generosity, her relationship with, Simon's family and all the good fluffy things, right? And the belief that, she's just this wonderful mother, all that. He told the jury, if you accept that she's a person of good character, that can be used to assess the credibility of her evidence and the likelihood of her committing the offenses, but it doesn't mean you need to find her not guilty because a person who has previously been of good character can commit a crime for the first time. Okay. Now, then Justice Beale switches over and starts talking about the prosecution and defense cases. And he would cite a number of instances where the jury heard conflicting evidence, basically. And he spent a lot of time discussing the narrative discrepancies around foraging. That word, foraging. I'm going to put ABC summary of what he told the jurors on the screen, and I'm going to read through it with you. So you'll see on the screen here, it says, Justice Beale says the defense outlined how Miss Patterson loved mushrooms and said the fact her children can't remember her picking mushrooms was just that they were young kids, and it didn't mean that she didn't forage. There was evidence by a mushroom expert that more people began foraging for mushrooms during COVID, he reminded the jury. He says the defense suggested that Miss Patterson's possible visit to the iNaturalist post about death cap mushrooms was not sinister, that she did not conceal the fact that she had bought a dehydrator from her Facebook friends, that she gave a consistent account throughout her testimony, and that there was no evidence of her intention to poison her relatives. Justice Beale says the prosecution alleges that she is a self-confessed liar, that her children had no knowledge of their mom's foraging for edible mushrooms, there were no messages to her friends or family, nor books on foraging, and asserted that her claims of being interested in foraging was a recent invention. He says the jury must weigh all of this up in its deliberations. Now then he would talk about that hearsay evidence and say, it needs to be treated with caution. Now he would explain the definition for the jury, and I'm going to quote him. It is evidence witnesses say they heard others say. So then he would go into Simon's testimony about the plate colors. Remember that whole thing with, the mismatching plates and whatnot? And reading from the transcript, he would talk about Ian's similar account of the dinnerware. And then he told the jury, quote, it's for you to determine whether Heather Wilkinson made the alleged statements to Simon and to Ian Wilkinson, end quote. Now then he would talk about evidence like outside of the court, right? And he was like, that may be unreliable because the witnesses might not accurately remember what they heard, or the person who made the statement might be mistaken, all that kind of stuff that goes along with that. Now, next up is another thing that they'll talk about, and that's tendency evidence. And quote, is evidence introduced in a legal case to show that a person has a tendency to act in a particular way based on their past behavior. Now, when he explained this to the jury, he told them, if you find Miss Patterson had a tendency to pick and eat wild mushrooms, or think there's a reasonable chance she did, you may consider this pastime increased the possibility that death cap mushrooms mushrooms ended up in the beef Wellington accidentally rather than deliberately, end quote. Now then he's going to go back over some of the inconsistencies of witness testimony. Now he'll say that there's 5 witnesses that fall into this category. Now just time-wise, I want to talk about the 2 that stuck out to me the most. So I'm going to talk more in depth about Simon and Ian, but in addition to them, he brought up testimony from Dr. Chris Webster, Tanya Patterson, that's Simon's sister, and Sally Ann Atkinson, that's the health worker. Now, Simon Patterson, at some point during questioning, Simon made the statement that he considered his relationship with Erin post-separation to be strong. However, when he was on the cross, the judge said, he said he meant friendship, not relationship. Now, secondly, he testified that when Erin asked him to lunch, she told him she wanted to discuss a serious and important medical issue, if you recall. Now, Simon said he couldn't remember the exact words that she used. Now, as far as Ian Wilkinson goes, okay, so first he gave the evidence to police that beef Wellingtons came from the tray or whatever, right? Then later he told the court that he didn't see where the beef Wellingtons came from. Now, secondly is a testimony that he gave that Patterson told her guest she had cancer. But during cross, the defense said he told police earlier that Erin announced that she had a suspected cancer. Now, he also would talk about some inconsistencies that the prosecution wanted him to highlight. I'm going to put them on the screen here and I'll read them out to you. So, number 1, whether Erin Patterson had a tendency to pick and eat wild mushrooms. Number 2, whether her children were invited to or free to attend the lunch that was in question. Number 3, the source of the mushrooms in the beef Wellington. Number 4, how much of the beef Wellington Erin Patterson ate. Number 5, how much of the beef Wellington Gail Patterson ate. Number 6, when Miss Patterson started experiencing diarrhea. And then number 7, when she suspected the lunch was the cause of Donna Gail Patterson's illness. And number 8, whether she knew Donna and Gail were in a coma on the Tuesday following the lunch. Now, Justice Beal would tell the jurors, look, it's up to y'all to decide which account, if any, of these is accurate. Okay, that's on y'all. Now, the telecommunications stuff will come back up, right? And specifically the limitations to it. Okay, so don't worry, we're not going to go all up into the telecommunications stuff too deep. That took me out, okay? There's so much of it, right? But for the sake of time and whatnot, we'll go over a few bits of it. So a large part of this was those expert witnesses that, we saw from her from multiple times, some of them, right? So we have Dr. Sorrell and Shaman Fox Henry. As far as Dr. Matthew Sorrell goes, he began by commenting on Sorrell's statement that there were significant limitations to the analysis. And then he would also remind the jurors that his conclusions about a possible visit to the locations of death cap mushroom sightings didn't equate to a definitive visit to a postcode. A phone's connection to a base station can't prove a phone was in a particular area without further information, end quote. Now, Bill would also tell the jurors to consider Sorrell's data in conjunction with other evidence in the trial. Now, as far as Fox Henry goes, he testified about that data was located on a number of Erin Patterson's devices that were seized from the home. Now, Bill would tell the jury about that. Fox Henry used keywords like death cap mushrooms, mushroom, poison to search for the data. And he also said that the records from one of the seized devices indicated it was used to visit web pages that listed sightings of death cap mushrooms. Now, Bill would also tell the jurors about the multiple factory resets of phone B. Remember, phone A was never located, okay? Phone B, I'm talking factory resets left and right. Everybody was getting one, right? Remember also that one of these was performed remotely, right? Where the cops have it in hand and she's, doing factory resets, allegedly. So the jurist advised them to consider Fox Henry's evidence in conjunction with other facts in the case. And I'll quote them. It can be used to infer whether she viewed reports of death cap mushrooms posted on iNaturalist in the months before the lunch. Once again, Beal mentioned to jurors that they alone are the fact finders and need to consider an expert's qualifications and whether their evidence is disputable. Now, Justice Beal would also talk about incriminating conduct. He told the jurors the prosecution classified certain behaviors as incriminating, and then basically the actions that illustrated an implied admission of guilt. Now, on the other hand, the defense argued the opposite of that, of course, innocent explanations for the behaviors mentioned by the prosecutions. Now, these behaviors at hand, right? I'm going to list them off here for you. So we have lying about using dried mushrooms in the beef Wellingtons, refusing treatment on the first presentation at Leongatha Hospital, and discharging herself against medical advice, reluctance to get treatment for herself on the second presentation at the hospital, reluctance to obtain medical treatment for her children while at Leongatha Hospital, lying by saying she had fed children leftover beef Wellingtons with mushrooms and pastry scraped off the day after the lunch, resetting phone B multiple times, lying to police during her formal interview about her usual mobile phone number, lying to police about not foraging for mushrooms or owning a dehydrator, and then regarding the children not becoming sick, Justice Beal would tell the jury this. I can put the screenshot up here and we'll read through it. Now this one's by Michaela Ordelin, and it says, jury told to disregard suggestion that children would be sick from leftovers. Justice Beal tells the jury to disregard the argument that toxins would have penetrated the leftover meat. Erin Patterson says she fed her children. The prosecution suggested the children would have become unwell if they ate the leftovers, but the judge says no expert was asked whether they would still experience symptoms if the mushroom paste and pastry had been scraped off the leftover meat. You have no expert evidence as to if that would be the case, so I direct you to disregard that evidence, he says. You would be speculating if you were to go down that path. Now, I personally think that that is a little bit of a win for her, because if they have to take that out, I mean, number one, you know they probably already formed an opinion on that, right? A lot of times with the stuff we see in court is like the bell's been rung, but you can't unring the bell, right? And this to me would be one of those. So that would be huge, but the judge at the very end was like, oh yeah, by the way, we didn't bring an expert in to say whether that was possible or not, so you have to exclude that. So it's almost like in your brain, you really have to just be able to compartmentalize things and be like, even though I think this, we can't include that. So to me personally, that is a small little win for Erin and her defense, because that's pretty major right there, right? And she got some small little wins throughout this, but let's continue on for now. Another one of the days or whatever, Justice Bill spent a lot of time dealing with rehashing like aspects of the testimony that were centered around Erin Patterson's bowels, okay? I'm sorry, but we have to go down that route again, okay? Now, during this time, he didn't really go into, instructions about like what the jury, should or shouldn't consider, all that type of stuff. But he would conclude the section on incriminating conduct with this. I'm going to put the screenshot up here and read it out to you. It includes, as you know, alleged lies, he says. I will concentrate on the alleged lies for a moment, because there are two ways you can use them if you find that there were lies, and there were some admitted lies. The law says you can use the accused lies to assess her credibility, the judge says. He tells the jury members that they can use that assessment to decide whether they believe other things she said. That is not to say just because you find the accused lied about one matter, you must also find she has been lying about everything else, he says. He warns them not to reason that just because she lied, she must be guilty. Justice Bill tells the jury that they can only take the path if they find Erin Patterson told an untruth, and the only reasonable explanation was that she committed the offenses she's been charged with. The jury is warned to consider all of the evidence before it. In relation to the other actions that the prosecution relies on as incriminating conduct, the judge says the same principles of law apply. He tells the jury that they can only use those instances as implied admissions of guilt if they believe the only reasonable explanation of that conduct is that Ms. Patterson committed the offenses. In summary, there are all sorts of reasons why a person might behave in a way that makes them look guilty, Justice Bill says. Now, Justice Bill would keep talking about like all these alleged lies that Erin Patterson told, authorities who were investigating the poisoning, all sorts of stuff, right? He'd also read a transcript of the text message exchange that she had with Simon when he declined the whole invitation to come over for lunch in the first place. And he'd also talk about Mr. Wilkinson's statement that it was his belief that she had the luncheon to let them know that she had cancer. Now then Justice Bill would like switch up to whether she actually said she had cancer at the lethal luncheon. Now he would cite Patterson's evidence that she'd once believed she had ovarian cancer, and I'll quote him, may have let her guests believe that she needed some treatment, end quote. Then Justice Bill would switch over to Simon's testimony, specifically a discussion that he had with his parents at the Cornborough Hospital about what she told them at the luncheon. Now, Beal would remind them that Simon told jurors he was aware that Erin was concerned about her elbow and that doctors did find cancer, but it was ovarian and unrelated to her elbow. The judge then told them only Erin and Ian Wilkinson can speak to what was said at the lunch, and what Mr. Wilkinson said was very different to what Don reportedly told Simon regarding the treatment, end quote. Now then, Beal would bring up the allegations that Patterson lied about planning to undergo that gastric bypass surgery, and he would read from the transcript of Erin's testimony when she said, end quote, she wanted surgery to address her weight and low self-esteem, but was embarrassed about it. Then as a cover for this, she led her guests to think she needed serious treatment, end quote. Now, he would also tell the jury about the discrepancies regarding the Enrich clinic, saying, quote, Patterson told the court she had a pre-surgery appointment in September 2023 and was puzzled to hear from the prosecutor that the clinic did not conduct gastric bypass surgery, but cited that Mandy provided an exhibit of a screenshot suggesting the clinic did offer liposuction, which Ms. Patterson had told the court she was also interested in, end quote. Now then the judge would throw out a warning about the alleged lies, and he would tell the jury, if you believe that she lied, you can use that to determine whether she lied about other things she has said. But that is not to say that if you find she lied about one matter, then you can find she lied about everything else. This is just one element to determine the truthfulness of what she said, end quote. Now, he also warned them not to reason that just because they find she lied about something, that she must be guilty. Evidence she told these lies is not evidence of guilt. There are all sorts of reasons why people might behave in a manner that makes them look like they have committed an offense, end quote. Now, he also would remind them about the whole, innocent until proven guilty. And he would say, quote, Erin Patterson doesn't have to prove anything. Proving a charge beyond reasonable doubt means the prosecutor has to go further than showing she's likely to be guilty, but they don't have to prove every fact. It's simply the essential ingredients or elements of the charges that they have to prove, end quote. Now, he also told the jury that in some murders, there's motive, right? Obviously. And sometimes the motive is only known to the offender. And then in this case, there is no motive known for why Miss Patterson would have allegedly wanted to kill her lunch guest, end quote. Even if it comes out, like say we had a thing that we could tell 100% like she did it, I don't even know if she knows why she did it. Okay, this one is definitely complicated. Okay, so now Justice Bill would then walk through the numerous reasons, right, that the defense offered for why she would not want to harm them. Now, he told the jury, the prosecution is not required to prove a motive to prove its case. However, the absence of a motive is a relevant consideration. It must be taken into account when the jury weighs up its verdicts. So if you find Miss Patterson had good reasons not to kill or attempt to kill her guest, that is a significant consideration, end quote. Now, then he would also make sure to tell the jury, and again, quote, to find Miss Patterson guilty of murder, you must be satisfied that she put the death cap mushrooms in the lunch as part of a conscious, voluntary, and deliberate conduct, end quote. Then he would talk about the element of intent, and he would tell the jury, look at all of Erin Patterson's proven actions before, at the time of, and after the lunch to help determine what her intention was when she served the meal. And if there are any reservations, the benefit of doubt must go to the accused, end quote. Then he would go back to Erin's fecal sample given at the hospital. And if the last test revealed the presence of death cap mushrooms, he would remind the jury that there is not a test to detect amatoxins. Now, then they go to break, they come back, whatever, and the juror said that he was ready to address the ultimate issues of whether Erin Patterson deliberately added death cap mushrooms to the beef Wellingtons and whether she had the necessary state of mind to prove the charges, end quote. So Justice Bill would talk about all the various witness testimony that, she's a loving daughter-in-law, great friend, great mother, all that stuff, right? And then they would move on to the aggressive text messages that were like contrary to all this, right? And they would talk about, her feelings of the isolation and, all the stuff that was going on there. Now, he would tell the jury that they only had to be satisfied with whether she did or did not commit the crimes. Now, Justice Bill told the jurors that there were 125 exhibits in the trial, and he would remind them not to make any assumptions about the importance of a disputed event if it's not mentioned in a chronology that they've been given, end quote. So then they would move into the instructions about reaching a verdict. He would tell the jury that the verdict must be unanimous in relation to each charge. Now, once the verdict has been reached, they push a buzzer, they return to court. The jury's going to be sequestered during deliberations, which will run from Monday to Saturday, 10:30 a.m. until 4:15 p.m. Okay. However, they will not be permitted to return home on Sunday. They're allowed to ask questions during deliberations, but they are at no time permitted to tell the court the verdict that jurors are considering at that stage. So, for example, if 7 people, and I'm going to quote them here, if 7 people are leaning one way and 5 the other, I don't want to know about it. You should only discuss the case with each other, and you should only do that when you are together in the privacy of the jury room, end quote. Now, Justice Bill would also thank the jury for their time and, all that. And he would say again, quote, I don't know whether you'll feel relieved or frustrated, but be assured you have made an important contribution to the administration of justice by your presence on this jury. I think the community would be very grateful too. Now, he would also announce that all the jurors, even the 2 alternates, will be given a dispensation of 15 years for which they will be exempt from a jury pool. They're like, well, thank the Lord, right? Now, before that balloting process started, he reminded the group that those who are chosen as the alternate should not discuss any of the trial or anything that happened in the jury room with anyone, even though they are no longer part of the decision, end quote. Now, the 2 jurors who were chosen as the alternates, they ended up being both young men, so that left 5 women and 7 men. So then Justice Beale gave the 12 jurors a separation oath and affirmation, and he told them, in the unlikely event that the group is separated, you must agree not to discuss with any person other than a member of the jury any matter relating to the trial or deliberations. So, y'all, we have made it. Here we are. I'm talking dehydrators. I'm talking death cap mushrooms. I'm talking foraging. Y'all, literally, this feels like Erin Patterson, and all of this information has become a daily routine that we meet at the water cooler and talk about, which I have absolutely loved it. And again, I want to say thank you to so many people, especially from Australia, who have reached out to talk down under. Shaz, thank you so much for all the stuff you've sent and whatnot, and everyone else as well. It's been so wonderful learning about Australia and how wonderful and nice everybody is there. I really hope to visit there one day. Now, obviously, learning about it through such a horrifying event like this was like, oh my God, are you serious? No. So let's talk about the burning question of the hour. Do I think she's guilty? Okay, now I've kind of, been open with this or whatever. Let's talk about a couple of things. Motive. No idea what her motive is. No idea. Okay. When the judge said that, I'm like, look, I don't know. I do think that she intentionally did this. Why? I don't know. I still don't know. Now, would I have a different opinion if I was there in the courtroom? Probably, right? Because this is very different in that we're not privy to so much that goes on in the courtroom like we are here, even watching it on TV. Even when we watch these trials on TV, we miss out on a lot, right? We rely on people like, Gigi and Lauren and Nadine and all these people who are there in the courtroom to kind of express these nuances to us. And we've been able to get some of that here, but not even being able to see it for ourselves has been a whole other level of removal. So where I'm at with it is, I do think she did it intentionally, and I don't know why. I have no idea. I don't know if she wanted to nurse them back to health. I think that this was some kind of a mixture of several things at one time. I think it was, I don't want to say a mental health break, but it was almost like seeing how she handled some things in life, allegedly through the witness, whatnot. It's almost like she would have these meltdowns, and it's almost like it got out of control. And I think that the idea of abandonment was so strong to her that she was willing to go to extremes, if you will, to alleviate that fear. Abandonment, aloneness is a powerful, powerful thing. Okay. And a lot of us have issues with it. I mean, no one wants to be abandoned. No one wants to be dumb. No one wants to be discarded. We know this, right? But it hits hard for a lot of other people, whatever. Seeing some of the things that we saw, I was like, I think that's definitely a part of it. But again, the part that could work towards her favor is because it makes zero sense why anyone would think in these circumstances that we have seen that they would actually get away with this crime. I think part of what wove through this was, like I said, just erratic emotional meltdown, let's say. And there might have been a plan up here. I've said this, y'all, hey, he's going to do this whole thing again about the roller coaster. But it's like you start over here with this plan, I'm going to get even, so I'm going to do this. But then when you go up here, oh, but I didn't think about this. So instead of coming back down again on the track, it's like, now we're on this track, right? And we're going over here, and it's like, okay, well, now what I do, I'm a little bit nervous and anxious, so I'll do this. You see what I'm saying? It was just poor decision after poor decision after poor decision. It could have literally started off with her being like, I'm going to get these death cap mushrooms, and I'm going to make them all sick, and they'll all rely on me to nurse them back to health. And Simon will see that I'm a wonderful person and that none of them can live without me. And I'll talk into a little weird pillow on my sofa about it. You know what I'm saying? And it could have started off as that and then gone off in a complete different direction. Or it could have been like, I'm going to get these death cap mushrooms and I'm going to kill all of them. And I'm not going to act like anything happened and no one will be able to prove that it was me that did it. I would like to think that that wasn't. Obviously, number one, you don't think somebody's that evil, but like also that naive, right? That they would get away with it because it's like, girl, they were absolutely going to point their finger at you, whether it was just to get them sick or whatever. So even if it was we're going to pull a Tylenol murder vibe up in here and we're going to be like, oh, it was a tainted thing at the store, we'll never know. Only Erin knows. And I would question how, and I don't know the way to say this, like in touch with her own true self she might be, just from some of the stuff that we've seen. If you take out the murder part, like take out the murder death cap part, just look at the line. And like the judge said, just because somebody lies doesn't make them a killer. Just because somebody lied about ABC doesn't make them whatever. I mean, I know we get, you know what I'm saying? But I mean, humans are very complicated, very, very complicated. So just someone who's willing to make lies up about medical situations, even if it was simply to be like, I didn't want them to know I'm getting gastric bypass. That's so extreme and so over the top. It's uncanny. So that would tell me if I found that out, like 100% we had a little genie, you know, magic lamp, whatever you want to call it, crystal ball, however you say it, to look into and mind read Erin, and we were like, okay, at minimum we know she lied about that. That's very telling about where somebody's, like, their self-worth maybe, or how their self-esteem or these kind of things, right, would be at, in my opinion. Again, I'm nobody. I'm just sitting on my sofa with no credentials. I'm just kind of going on my own personal psychology about myself and, you know, life experience. And so that would tell me a lot about that person. So that's where I'm like, I don't know how in touch with her own authentic self she would be. So then you factor in the mushroom stuff part, and that's where I'm like, there's so much going on here. I think that the jury could have some reasonable doubt because of some of the stuff that the judge is like, you can't consider this, you can't consider that. And because it's so overwhelming, so much information. So it'll just depend. This is a learning lesson. Like for me, watching a court case in Australia this closely, it's a first, right? So we'll see. Now, the other thing I want to say is, and we mentioned this in the live chat, I thought it was so interesting to see how dot your I's, cross your T's the court system is there. Major on lockdown about no information getting out. We're not making that, and even though this is like very unique for over there, how much this case exploded like globally, right? But the judge basically reciting the entire trial back to the jury. Y'all are going to be locked down for these days. You're going into deliberations. Like, to me, I'm just like, wow, they do a really good job. Like, because at the end of the day, whether you are the defendant, the plaintiff, whatever you want to call it, you would want this level of meticulousness done. You see what I'm saying? Now, again, I wasn't there. I've heard, you know, back and forth about, you know, the judge and this and that, you know, I don't know. I wasn't there. So that part I can't say from lack of nuance in that, but just the procedure part of it, I'm very impressed by that. Very impressed. So anyways, that's it. I'll stop talking. And this is a long video. That is it. Drop it. What do you think? What kind of a verdict are we going to get? Let me know down in the comment section below. While you're down there, if you could drop off some sofas, some weird little pillows too, if you want, if you're feeling spicy, if you're feeling dicey. But drop those off for myself, Roscoe and Spirit, Bo and Luke, and you, the Sofa Squad. I do appreciate it. Until we all gather down there to talk about this and that and all the other stuff we talk about, I'll see y'all soon.
I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.
Welcome to the Sofa Squad, sipping from the cup that, hey, come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough.